Welcome to the Potter blog site. I want to give you a quick update on some posts I did earlier about earthquake analysis and basically how to schedule for aftershocks and expensive projects and time-critical projects. And there's a lot to discuss that's not easily explainable in a simple blog post. So I wanted to run you guys through it quickly, just to give you an idea of exactly what's going on. And the first thing I wanted to show you is from the Japanese Meteorological Agency. They typically offer aftershock outlooks on large earthquakes, but for some reason they haven't been posting them for this Fukushima quake. So I thought I'd use a little bit of analysis to give you an idea of how one can schedule and plan for aftershocks. And this is a post I put up on June 18th. Basically it says plan for 3 magnitude 6 to magnitude 6.9 Fukushima aftershocks between June 18th and July 1st. Well, not too long after I posted that, there was a 5.9 quake, and I believe yesterday there was one 6.7 quake. And I wanted to, like I said, just give you some idea of how this is different from earthquake prediction and aftershock analysis is. So first let me throw you up to the Excel page here. This is the analysis I did on 6/17. Basically what you see here is all the Fukushima aftershocks from magnitude 5 to magnitude 7.9. The Y component of the chart here is the total number of aftershocks. Down here on the X component is the total days after the initial quake. And I go out to 1600 days, which is roughly 4.5 years. And I stopped at that point because there's a strong history of Japanese earthquakes having their largest aftershock within 4.5 years. Matter of fact, there are several that had their largest aftershock pretty much almost exactly 4.5 years after initial quake. And what we'll see here is two colors basically. This blue color, these are the actual quakes that occurred. And this red color is the projection of future quakes. And the way you make this projection is basically from a curve fit. And this is the equation for the curve fit, and it's a natural log. And really the key thing to understand here is this R squared factor. The closer this R squared factor is to 1, the closer the fit is to the actual data. So this chart here shows basically a 0.9907 fit, which is extremely close fit for the data, for the trend line. And so you can see here how it matches and just rolls on out. Now what this tells us is we can use this formula to project when we'll have more aftershocks. And one of the things that makes aftershocks different is that they tend to follow a pattern and they're localized in the region. Pattern for aftershocks is, for example, in Fukushima, if you have a 9.0 quake, you expect approximately 1 8.0 aftershock, 10 7.0 range aftershocks, 6 100 range 100 magnitude 6 aftershocks, 1,000 magnitude 5 aftershocks, and 10,000 magnitude 4 aftershocks, so on and so forth. And if you look here, you can see it doesn't quite follow that path, but it's because we level out at roughly 800 aftershocks after 4.5 years. But the ratios there are pretty solid. So what I've done here is I've made a set of charts. This is for magnitudes 5 through 7.9. I made a chart here for specifically magnitude 5, a chart for magnitude 6 to 6.9, a chart for magnitude 7, and then an extremely speculative chart for magnitude 8 aftershock. And I'll discuss that and why it's extremely speculative in a while. Now here's basically the thing that got me thinking about this and what first drew my attention is that the Japanese announced that they were going to start building their tsunami barrier roughly in April. So the question is why not build that barrier immediately? Why not start working on it on day one? Well, this is where understanding manpower analysis and logistics and scheduling, especially on a multi-billion-dollar potential project, comes in handy. If you can see here, there's a large number of earthquakes that occur very early on, aftershocks that occur very early on. So you'd prefer, if you have limited resources, is not to start building something and then have it destroyed by an aftershock or a follow-on tsunami. So you want to schedule far enough out that you're out of this vertical line here and out in this flatter range. And if we look at the magnitude 7 chart, you can see here almost immediately there were 3 magnitude 7 earthquakes. Then there was 1 magnitude 4 earthquake. And then 1 magnitude 5, sorry, let me say that again. There were 3 magnitude 7 earthquakes almost immediately within less than a day of the initial shock. There was 1 more, looks like roughly 50 days after the first shock, and then an additional one that fell very shortly thereafterwards. But as you can see how the curve levels out quickly. So you expect a lot within the first 100 days, first 50 days actually, and then within the next 4 years you would only expect roughly 2.5 more magnitude 7 aftershocks. So this chart roughly lines up with where TEPCO started building the tsunami barrier in Fukushima, which is if you've got limited resources, limited manpower, and potential for further destructive quakes, you want to direct that manpower where it is best needed, which is at the reactor site, and you don't want to start building the seawall while there's still a good chance of another tsunami coming in. So how exactly does one set dates for this? Well, what I did was came up with a chart with basically an Excel sheet that uses those calculations for the projections, and keep a running total. And you can see here are the dates. And I'll go through this quick, otherwise this video will be 3 hours long. But here I tracked the running earthquakes, magnitudes 5, 6, 7, and 8, and how far we are from what's expected. And I'll show you what that means here with this chart. This is the delta chart, which is I take the actual number of earthquakes, aftershocks that are expected on any particular day, and I subtract out the predicted. So here's the 0 line. From here up means we had more aftershocks than predicted on that day. And from here down means we had less aftershocks than predicted on that day. So what that means is when you're here on the positive side, stress is being relieved off the earthquake fault. When you don't have as many aftershocks as expected, that means that stress is building up on the earthquake fault. Now this blue line is the magnitude 5 to 5.9 shocks. The red line is the magnitude 7, and you can see we've had several magnitude 7s, and we're not expecting any. Actually, if you take this out, it doesn't get down to 1 expected until roughly December 7th of 2011. And then the green line is the magnitude 6 shocks. And what I did here was I plotted these out. And so you can see for right out till about May 13th, we had more magnitude 6 shocks than what the math would lead you to believe would occur. But then all of a sudden we started dropping on the magnitude 5 shocks. And then we started dropping on the magnitude 6 shocks. So we're building up a deficit of magnitude 6 earthquakes. And that means stress is building up on the fault line. Now, what I've done here is I've looked for patterns. And one of the interesting patterns, if you can see it here, is that whenever the magnitude 5 shocks are decreasing, which means stress is building up. When that line crosses the magnitude 6 expected, there's an earthquake of a magnitude 6 range. So you can see here the decreasing blue line, and right where it crosses the green line, there's a magnitude 6 earthquake. Here again, as the magnitude 5 earthquakes are declining and stress is building up, once it crosses the magnitude 6 line, we get an earthquake. Now it doesn't hold true every time. For example, here's a magnitude 5 that didn't cross, but you notice we're building up stress and then we had a release. So when we come out to about March 15th, we start running a deficit on the magnitude 6 shocks. We're getting less than expected. And if you look here, and this is a very tight little catch here, but there's a, it looks like it's about June 2nd. Again, we had the magnitude 6 line cross, or sorry, we had the magnitude 5 line cross the magnitude 6 line, so we had a magnitude 6 quake. So we come out here to where I was making the projection, and I posted this on the 17th of June, and you can see where the line was expected to cross if there were no further earthquakes. That was roughly June 18th. And if you notice where this magnitude 6 line is we're roughly 3 earthquakes below what we should have. So we're down three magnitude 6 earthquakes. Now if you look at the history of these magnitude 6 quakes, what you'll see is we're never down more than, in this chart, 3.75. So we've never had a deficit of more than 3.75 magnitude 6 earthquakes before we had a set of them. So if we take that out, that came out to be about July 1st. Now on July 1st, if there were no further magnitude 6 quakes, we'd have a deficit of 3.79. Well, shortly after I posted this, we had a 5.9, and then yesterday we had a 6.7. And I used these dates are the Japanese dates. These are the dates of the earthquake in the Japanese time frame. So what I've done is I've updated these charts for new data up until 6/23. And you can see what's happened here is we've had the blue line almost crossed. Then we had another magnitude 5, and the blue line, which is the magnitude 5 line, crossed the magnitude 6 line again, and we've got an earthquake right here. Now that's just a small trending analysis. It doesn't necessarily hold true every time, but it's interesting to note that it's an indicator of when the deficits and earthquake and aftershocks cross. It's again an indication. So this has current data up until the 24th, and you can see even with this magnitude 6.7 quake we had, we're still down. We're still short 2 magnitude 6 quakes for the day. And if we look here, we're about to cross again, and we run out into the same deficit of minus. Let's see what the deficit was over here. Minus 3.8 earthquakes. So right around June 18th, we'll again have a deficit of 3.8 M6 earthquakes. So short of it, what it's saying is that if you're planning anything critical schedule-wise that needs to be accomplished that might be affected by a series of magnitude 6 earthquakes, then you need to complete those tasks as soon as possible, because there's a window between now and roughly July 18th where 3 more of these magnitude 6 quakes would be expected. On the other hand, if you're getting ready to start some sort of project, you might want to hold off until these earthquakes have happened. Now, what gets tricky is if these earthquakes didn't happen and this magnitude 6 kept building, the stress has kept rising. I would project that means we're going to pull a magnitude 7 earthquake forward.